What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So yesterday, we did have EA Play Live, where EA showed up and made announcements for several of their upcoming titles, which does include Battlefield 2042 and even the return of a franchise that had been rumored for a little while now. We'll go over that here today. Also, we're going to be talking about the Famitsu sales charts, as it does give us our first real look at how The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD did in Japan, and we're also going to be talking about that explosive lawsuit that Activision is currently facing in California with some accounts that are just outright unacceptable. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with Square Enix and Final Fantasy, specifically the Final Fantasy Remastered games that they had announced at E3. People got really excited and then immediately let down when they showed the platform that it was going to, that being PC and, oh yeah, cell phones. Well, now it looks like Square would entertain the idea of this going to consoles. We can see this over on Twitter. This from Nebellion saying Square Enix has released a Pixel Remaster Q&A. If there's enough demand, they'll bring it to other platforms using trusty old Google Translate on the website itself that says, if there are many requests, I will do my best so that I can play in more various environments. Support me. So I have to believe Square knows that people want this on other platforms. I don't really know what all this is about, although we occasionally see companies do this, basically, hey, do free marketing for us and we'll think about it. Now, Square knows people want it on other platforms. That seems pretty straightforward. What I would like to see, if Square's listening, let's get a actual physical release, put all 6 of those Final Fantasy games on a cartridge for the Switch and on disc for the PlayStation, Xbox, and everywhere else. Let's actually celebrate Final Fantasy here. Also, occasionally, we'll see new information or footage pop up for Earthbound 64, and it looks like the other day, about 30 seconds of footage found its way out online, and you can see some of it here. Now, this appears to be from Twitter user Zen64, who purchased a CD. This was from a Nintendo company report for just over $300, and it featured a Space World 1997 trailer for Mother 3 on the Nintendo 64. And you can even see some gameplay here for the game, which isn't new. We've actually seen gameplay for Earthbound 64. I know we had some get out there a couple years ago, so this isn't necessarily new in the sense that it's the first time we've seen gameplay, but it is new gameplay and footage that we have not seen before. And people are very interested in this build of what ended up being Mother 3, because I mean, I do think there is a prototype out there somewhere that's on like a cartridge, a slice of the game, a small level, a section where you can run around and maybe do some combat like this, where maybe they were recording or putting parts of these together. That is like the ultimate goal, I guess, with Earthbound 64, is to find a playable build of it that's hopefully out there somewhere, and then it can be dumped online, and we could possibly someday play it for ourselves on our flashcards or something on the Nintendo 64. But for now, about 30 seconds more of Earthbound 64 footage getting out there. Oh, and we've talked about that Giga Leak several times now, but there was something else that popped up that I thought was pretty funny, and it has to do with Nintendo trying to figure out the correct name for the different systems that they were developing through R&D, and obviously you're going to go through all these ideas, just throw random things at the wall, see what sticks, and this one had to do with the Revolution, which eventually turned into the Wii. But take a look at some of these names that Nintendo was, I guess, cycling through and seeing what worked, and I mean, it's pretty good, right? Enter Nintendo, Every Nintendo, Jet Nintendo. They had Nintendo Resort, which was, I guess, stood for Revolutionary Entertainment System on Relaxing Time Nintendo Access. And some of these make sense, like Every Nintendo, considering the big push for the Wii at the time was the fact that it had the virtual console where you could play all the old Nintendo systems. My favorite one, though, is New Nintendo GameCube. That's right, they were playing around with that new title even back then when trying to name the Wii. And I guess they didn't want to go with New Nintendo GameCube because they were scared of too much success, so they just went with Wii instead. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with EA Play Live. It took place yesterday, and they showed off 6 different titles. 3 of them were new announcements, and what we're going to do is go down the list of the different games that were shown off here and kind of circle back around for 2 of them. Let's start at the top here. That's Grid Legends, coming out 2022, and it looks like it's gonna be a grid game that's gonna be more focused on the story mode overall. And I guess the big thing is they're gonna do live action for the story. They showed several behind the scenes parts where they were actually filming it, and it's an interesting idea for a racing game to really lean into that story mode. So yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on this one. I guess we'll find out more info on this going into 2022 when it's set for release. And then they showed off Lost in Random. This is coming out September 10th. A very unique looking game. Looks to be a crossover between like an action adventure RPG with card mechanics. So that's one I like the look of it with the art style, and I'll be checking that one out when it drops in September. Knockout City is seeing its Season 2 release July 27th. Then we have the next major update that was announced for Apex Legends, that being called Emergence, coming out August 3rd. And then we move to Battlefield 2042, which was a very interesting aspect to this game that was revealed. It had leaked earlier in the day. It was called Battlefield 2042 Portal. And the idea of Portal is a new mode in Battlefield 2042 created by Ripple Effect Studios, DICE LA, and will feature the ability to play DICE-created, community-created, custom, or old remastered content without ever leaving Battlefield 2042. In fact, they're pulling content from a lot of their older Battlefield titles like Battlefield 1942, Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3, and then, of course, mixing in Battlefield 2042. One example they showed was like 4 or 5 players from Battlefield 2042 taking on like 30 players from Battlefield 1942, citing the differences in technology as giving, of course, the players for Battlefield 2042 a significant advantage so that the numbers game would try to even things out. And that could present some really cool game types when you start mixing in all of the remastered maps that they showed off, which is, I mean, this could be something that can continue to add like more and more to this game experience as we go along, considering they're going to have the ability to create and share these different game types and everything in the community. But the big announcement closed out the show, as it should for a lot of these events, right? Sometimes we'll see an event that just kind of tapers off, like Capcom at E3, where they closed with esports for some reason. But no, EA came prepared this time, because Dead Space is coming back. It's being made by EA Motive, and these were rumors that we heard a month or so ago, and it got people really excited at the idea of it, but of course, people are still kind of concerned when EA gets thrown in the mix because the idea of microtransactions and other things. I mean, if you look at Dead Space 3, they tried to figure out how to get like microtransactions in there, and it actually really hurt the game, I would say. But it looks like we're not going to be dealing with that here. The first thing we'll go over, there will be no microtransactions for this Dead Space game. It does appear to be a remake of the original Dead Space, but they're going to take some gameplay elements from later Dead Space games and kind of work them in. You can see some of the trailer here with the suit powering up. Still looks like it has that kind of eerie tone and setting as we'd expect with a Dead Space game. And in an article with IGN, it looks like we had some extra details coming out mentioning that it is being completely rebuilt in Frostbite. Of course, visuals are going to be redone there, gameplay, but also 3D audio. There will be no load screens, and they want to remain as faithful to the original as possible, and they'll have enhancements in limb dismemberment. Now, the big thing here is it's being targeted for, I guess, current gen platforms now. Basically, there won't be any last gen versions on the Xbox One or the PS4. Nope, just Xbox Series, PlayStation 5, and PC. So obviously a big announcement there for Dead Space fans. It's cool to see this come back, even if Visceral, which obviously Visceral's not around anymore, they can't make it, isn't going to be doing this one. It's at least good to see that Dead Space is still, well, alive and actually being thought of by EA. And who knows, maybe if this one does well, they'll continue on with the series going forward. And I guess the big thing now is, when is this coming out? Well, they didn't give us a release date, a window, year, nothing. So this could be one that's a little ways off here, maybe 2023. The earliest is probably late 2022, I would say. But either way, good to see Dead Space come back. And you know what? This EA Play Live, overall, it wasn't like the biggest show or anything, but I think it was all right. I mean, if you looked up and down the list, they had some interesting things in there. They had racing, they had Lost in Random, they had Battlefield, of course, thrown in there, some updates for some of their live service titles, and they closed out with something like Dead Space. So you know what? Not bad from EA. Next up, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts in Japan. Of course, these are the sales charts that track week to week. They give us an idea how different games sell and launch in Japan. And we can head over here to the top 10, where we can see The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD did top the charts in its debut week, selling 159,089 copies. This launched on a Friday, so it's only like 2 days of tracking there, but it's a very strong launch for Skyward Sword HD, placing it between Link's Awakening and Breath of the Wild. So not a bad spot there for Skyward Sword. Right below that at number 2, we have Crayon Shin-Chan. That sold 107,000 copies there. Monster Hunter Stories 2 continues to move along here at number 3, 32,000 copies. Then we have E-Baseball Professional Baseball Spirits 2021, Ring Fit Adventure, Minecraft, Game Builder Garage, Mario Golf, Super Rush, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Earth Defense Force 2 for a Nintendo Switch. That's interesting. And you can see the top 10 were all Switch titles. Moving over to the hardware, the Nintendo Switch was at the top, 64,107. I'm going to be very curious to see how these numbers in particular continue along for the hardware side of things, considering the OLED model has now been announced, and typically people will then hold off maybe for that newer model. But remember, it's also $50 more, so you do have to take that into account as well, and could be more expensive in different regions like here in Japan in terms of that price difference. Then we have the PS5 at 10,107 copies. Unfortunately, appears to still be very supply constrained as it did drop down there. The Xbox Series systems, however, actually went up about 800 systems. Now, it's you know, still under 2,000 systems here for the week, but that is pretty good for the Xbox overall, and I think at this point is tracking pretty well above the Xbox One. And then we have the 3DS at 584 systems and the PlayStation 4 at 295. So overall, pretty good launch for The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. Of course, it'll be interesting to see how it continues on here, because usually after the first week, these games see a massive decline in terms of sales. But I think Skyward Sword on the Switch is a much better experience than what was on the Wii, and I do see more and more people talking about either giving it a second chance or trying it for the first time, and either way, they're enjoying it. So really cool to see here for Skyward Sword HD. I'll be curious to see how it does in the NPD sales for the month of July, which we'll find out more about that next month, but so far so good here for Skyward Sword HD. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about this lawsuit that Activision is currently facing in California. Now, I want to start by saying this is a very sensitive topic, and there are some details here that might just be outright disturbing to some people. So just putting that warning out there now. There are timestamps down below where you can skip ahead, but I think this is a very important topic to take a look at here, especially in the overall gaming landscape. Now, let's head over here to VGC, where they say California sues Activision Blizzard for sexual harassment and discrimination against women. The lawsuit describes a frat boy culture where male employees behave inappropriately. They go on to say Activision Blizzard has been sued by the California State of Fair Employment and Housing because of its reported failure to handle sexual harassment and discrimination against female employees. The suit goes on to cite alleged incidences of sexual harassment and discrimination at Activision Blizzard, including reports of cube crawls in which male employees drink copious amounts of alcohol as they crawl their way through various cubicles in the office and often engage in inappropriate behavior toward female employees. Male employees proudly come into work hungover, play video games for long periods of time during work while delegating their responsibility to female employees, engage in banter about their sexual encounters, talk openly about female bodies, and joke about rape. And in one particularly disturbing account, it says in a particularly tragic example, a female employee committed suicide. The suit alleges that at a holiday party before her death, male coworkers were passing around nude photos of her. And you can just see several of the allegations and accounts here. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on, to the point where after a 2-year investigation, the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing just said, well, we're taking this to court. Like, it got to that point with Activision Blizzard, so much so that they say they failed to be able to fix or deal with any of this themselves. And I mean, at this point, it's going to court. There will be due process. Right now, at this time, to obviously be a straightforward, it's allegations that will be seen in a courtroom, but like, this is some serious stuff, and it's all very unacceptable when you read through it, and just honestly, at points, disturbing. Now, Activision did respond to the lawsuit in a statement saying, "We value diversity and strive to foster a workplace that offers inclusivity for everyone. There is no place in our company or industry or any industry for sexual misconduct or harassment of any kind. We take every allegation seriously and investigate all claims. In cases related to misconduct, action was taken to address the issue." The DFEH includes distorted and in many cases false descriptions of Blizzard's past. We have been extremely cooperative with the DFEH throughout their investigation, including providing them with extensive data and ample documentation, but they refuse to inform us what issues they perceived. So we have the lawsuit filed, we have a response from Activision, and really at this point, it's going to be going through the court system. And I mean, I guess from what I can tell, looking at Bloomberg Law, which you can see here, when it comes to the relief, it's mostly just like punitive damages, unpaid wages, injunctive relief, basically just like money being paid out. And I mean, if there's one thing Activision has plenty of, that's money. They can pay, obviously, to make this go away eventually, I guess. But the biggest thing here is to shine a spotlight on what is happening here, because it's not just with Activision. We've seen several allegations with Ubisoft to the point where they had to respond. They said they were going to be looking at their overall workplace culture and trying to figure this out. But then later on, which was pretty recently, there have been reports coming out from within Ubisoft saying minimal changes have happened. And I think looking at all of this, it comes down to these companies still just making tons of money from their current properties. And for the most part, what we see is this kind of stuff doesn't really affect the overall mainstream. Like, people who walk into a store and buy the new Call of Duty that comes out this year, they're not going to be deterred from that because of a lawsuit like this. And that's the most unfortunate part, is at the end of the day, there's really nothing that's holding these companies accountable because it runs completely on money. Like, I think most of us understand at this point that if we want to really push back against any of these companies, what we're seeing here, you stop buying what they're selling, but it just doesn't seem to work that well in gaming. And this is obviously a serious issue. I mean, to the point where they were describing it as a frat culture, but it appears like it goes way beyond that. Like, they were all just hanging out one day watching Wolf of Wall Street and just like, you know, I think they have something there. But you figure if it gets to a point where it is an entire issue with workplace culture at a video game publisher and developer like Activision, that it would end up falling on the higher-ups who allowed it to get to that point. Because you figure, hey, their job is to manage and make sure none of this is going on. But it's not like they're clean from this either. If you go back over a decade, Bobby Kotick had his own lawsuit that he lost. I mean, you can see here, Activision boss loses legal battle over sexual harassment case. This was dated, August 3rd, 2010, where he just had to pay out some money and then move along. And if there's one thing Bobby Kotick doesn't have any real issue with, is paying out money to make some of this stuff go away. I mean, he just got a bonus of $200 million. We found out the other day that Shigeru Miyamoto brought in like $2.5 million after bonuses. So Bobby Kotick got a bonus that's like 90 times more than what Miyamoto makes. And Miyamoto created Mario and Zelda. Now, the response online for this lawsuit after it was put out there with all of these different accounts being made public was a lot of pushback, as you would expect and as should be, against Activision Blizzard. So much so that we can see here, World of Warcraft players are staging in-game protests against Activision Blizzard. I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing. Is, you know what the real protest would be? Is if everyone just decided to sign out of World of Warcraft all at once, because then obviously they'd be like, oh, our live service game that relies on monthly active users has no one signed in. There might be a problem here, but the different people who were organizing these different protests in the game did explain it. It makes sense. A lot of them, even if they've canceled their subscription, they're still locked in for 6 months. So in their mind, they cause a big fuss in the game with these different protests to at least try to get a message out there. Like I said, they're already kind of locked in anyway. Might as well create a fuss in the game while they can. But we'll see what happens here with the lawsuit going forward in California. And I gotta admit, I'm looking at this, it's hard not to be demoralized around the situation like this with Activision, because let's say it goes through the court system with these horrendous accounts and allegations and all this stuff, and it's all proven correct. I mean, Activision's probably just gonna pay some money out and then move along. Call of Duty on it being the best-selling game of the year, most likely, and it'll just be business as usual for Activision. In fact, I don't even think anything would really change internally. I mean, they could say it does, but then it could be like Ubisoft, where nothing really changes anyway, because at the end of the day, these are corporations that run on money, and if the people in the company are making them more money than they're costing them, even through lawsuits, well, they still stick around. So it's tough. I don't really know how this is going to play out going forward, especially because the new Call of Duty is going to be shown, and everyone's going to be covering it, you know, press and all this stuff. And in the back of everyone's mind, they're going to be like, whew, that lawsuit and those different things being described, but here's the new Call of Duty game. Also, real quick, we are kind of painting this whole thing with Activision with a broad brush. There are still thousands of people that work at Activision that have like nothing to do with this. They're not mixed up in any of this workplace culture or frat boy stuff. And they're kind of just off, I'm sure, working on these projects on their own or trying to develop different things. And they're probably seeing this and they're horrified, I'm sure. So while we're going to be talking about Activision quite a bit going forward, I'm sure, with this lawsuit, keep in mind there are quite a few innocent people, of course, working at Activision just trying to make games, and they hear this, and it's like, what can you do? And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, what did you think of the EA Play presentation? 4% said it was great, 14% said it was all right, 4% said it was bad, and then 78% said there was an EA Play presentation today, and I actually noticed that a lot. That's why I put that as one of the answers, because there were a lot of people on Twitter who said, wait, there was a presentation today, and it wasn't advertised that well. It wasn't even really hyped up by EA, and maybe that was for the best, although it did close out with Dead Space, which was pretty cool, but that was like the big reveal, the big announcement, and a lot of their top studios weren't there. Like, we heard there was no Star Wars stuff here. We're gonna see anything about Dragon Age or Mass Effect or Skate or any of those games. So I think for the most part, EA kind of just played it up correctly, and everyone was pleasantly surprised, even though it was rumored for a bit, with Dead Space. And that's kind of the right way for EA to go about this. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Junk saying, whenever Nintendo has a successful system, they start to get lazy. Nintendo Switch Online is its own mess. The fact that the Wii had more consoles on the Virtual Console just shows how much of a regression it is. I feel like right now, Nintendo is playing things very safe, but they're also trying to navigate something they really haven't had to before, which is an online subscription service like Nintendo Switch Online, mixed in with over 100 games that, hey, they might be selling even half of them on the Virtual Console during the Wii or the Wii U, and now they're trying to figure out, okay, what's too much value in terms of games for that $20 a year, and then how do we eventually break this off and charge more? And again, I think they're kind of coasting right now because they're not even sure how to do it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's the Activision Blizzard lawsuit? Let me know what you think about it. It is linked down below if you want to read through it a bit more, because there is quite a bit to go over there. And then also, what'd you think about EA Play Live? Were you really excited to see Dead Space, or what about that Battlefield 2042 Portal mode? Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time for Newswave.